Is there a better way to start a week, Bob, than with two double-digit, come-from-behind victories for the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are now 50-10 on the season? Mikey McNuggets, Bob Schmidt of the Fear the Fro podcast here, coming at you on a Monday. We are taping on Sunday night, though, prior to White Lotus. So just so y'all know, this is happening before the chaos of White Lotus. But this is airing on Monday. And Bob, over the weekend, we saw two incredible comebacks from Cleveland. Let's focus on the one we saw on Sunday against the Blazers. They had no energy. First three quarters was, frankly, atrocious. And then Ty Jerome hits a three at the end of the third quarter buzzer. And next thing you know, you looked around the crowd and said, the Cavs are somehow going to win this game. And they did exactly that. I was there, Bob. You were watching from back wherever you – I think you live in Kansas City, if I remember correctly.
That's right. That's
so back in Kansas City, did you think – at any point of the game, the Cavs we're going to simply throw in the white towel and not be able to pull out that comeback?
There was a moment. The one moment that crossed my mind was, I believe it was the third quarter, and they tagged Hunter with a technical.
Yep.
And at that moment, they sent him to the bench, and I thought, is this Kenny saying, you know what, it's just not going our way? It was, I think in the third quarter, it just felt like a parade of free throws from Avdia that entire quarter. But then, like you said, when they put that little rally on at the end of the third and got it to basically 10 points heading into the fourth, that's when I felt like, all right, this is going to happen. Because Ty and Hunter were giving me the vibes of that the whole game. I just didn't know if it could overcome what we were seeing on the other side.
It did. And these Cavaliers, whether they're from Virginia or Cleveland, don't know how to lose games. They're national champions. They are undefeated together as teammates in the NBA. And Bob, I don't know how many different accolades and adjectives and good words and kind things we can say about those two in particular, but the way that they have single-handedly saved Cleveland in back-to-back games, it was in the fourth quarter, end of the third, fourth quarter today, or on Sunday. On Friday, it was as soon as they entered the game in the first quarter to kind of even the ship. But those two playing together, it has worked 10 times better than anyone could have imagined at their most optimistic levels, and to see it bear the fruit that it has already has been nothing short of spectacular. And I don't know what you expected when Hunter came and how quickly he could integrate in, but he's even closing games now at the fourth, Mobley at the five, with Jared Allen on the bench. It's happening so quickly, Bob. I almost don't know how to take it because it's so good right now.
I know. I mean, especially coming out of the gate there. I think his first four games, he was like 13 to 29 or 21 from three. He was over 70% true shooting. And for them to be, 8-0 now, and for him to just slot in there seamlessly. I figured with the chemistry between he and Ty that it would be a good fit between those two, but that always doesn't transpose to the actual rest of the lineups they're out there with. And for him to be able to be there late in the game, Mobley never fouls out. So to have the luxury of a game where Mobley fouls out, yes, you can bring back Jared Allen, but you got big defensive plays, big contests late in that game from Hunter, where he just walled up on Avdia and, Simons and some of these guys that were beyond just the scoring. The 32 points. To see a night where Friday you get Tatum and Brown do that ridiculous amount of scoring and they still lose, and then to come back on Sunday and you have a bench duo and Hunter and Ty do that in the second half of the game to lead our team back. It feels like everything is falling in the right manner. Even when you think that you've dug yourself too big of a hole, that massive run on Friday, and then essentially 3 quarters of things not going the way you would want it to in this game, to storm back and get these wins, it's almost more meaningful from a viewing standpoint for me. It's more satisfying to watch them do it with adversity and turn it around and steal it at the end, which I shouldn't say steal it in the sense that anything was stolen. They earned this.
Oh, yeah.
But they had to fight to do it. And for them to lock in and do it in the fourth quarter and overtime was incredible.
Kenny said before the game, I think Ethan asked him, I could be wrong on who asked the question, but someone asked him, do you have to give your team a pump-up speech? Because, coming off an emotional win over Boston, the Blazers are not a juggernaut by any means. And Kenny was like, no, we're better and we got it. And we got into the post-game locker room and Kenny goes, maybe I should have given a speech, actually. Maybe you guys were right. So he saw the Cavs started this game in mud. And give Portland credit because their pressure really took Cleveland out of what they were trying to accomplish offensively. Tomorrow Herro is as good of an on-ball pressure defender in terms of navigating in and out of screens and staying on a man. And he's a big dude. Like seeing him pregame and warm-ups, he's all a 6'7", 6'8", pretty stocky and super athletic. And he was giving Darius fits. Darius missed some open shots in the first half, but I believe he was 2 of 13 at one point in the game. And the Cavs just could get nothing going offensively. And then all of a sudden, they started to claw their way back. And they made a couple runs in the third, and then Portland answered again. And at that point, Bob, I said, you know what? I had the tweet in my drafts. Hand up, I did. I promise this is real. I had, you know what? Games like this make me appreciate 49-10 so much more. Why? Because this happens in the NBA. This is supposed to happen to really good teams. You just have one of those games where you don't have it. And next thing you know, Sam Merrill hit a couple threes in the third. Ty Jerome then hit the buzzer beater 3 to end the quarter. And next thing you know, we are sitting here on a podcast talking about the Cavs' 50th win of the season, coming back from 18 points down, and it being a game that not Donovan Mitchell, not Darius Garland, not Evan Mobley, and not Jared Allen. None of the core four are the headlines of this win.
You get the Merrill triples, you get Hunter, you get Ty Jerome, and then Max Strus at the end of that game. All those guys were so pivotal in that stretch. I love winning that way. Sometimes it's more satisfying to win where the unexpected contributors, where the guys who are just extras end up leading the way, and you don't have to lean on the core four. It's such a dramatic shift from last season, too, to be able to go through that playoff run last year where it felt like Donovan Mitchell was just willing them out of the first round almost single-handedly, him and Evan Mobley late in that series. And then to get to this season where, like you said, a night like tonight, it doesn't even feel like we always – and the bench scoring since All-Star break has just been unbelievable.
And Hunter came and started today, so his 32 doesn't count as bench scoring, but it's still part of the bench. Yeah. And, Bob, I said this and I did an immediate reaction. And in the moment, as I'm watching this game unfold with Jared Allen on the bench, Evan Mobley at the 5, and Hunter at the 4, I'm thinking to myself, those were George Niang's minutes. And you can't do that with George Niang. And it's no disrespect to George. George, I love George. Great guy. He's actually playing very well in Atlanta. But Kenny didn't have that option to close a game with Georgia. I guess he technically had the option if you want to get specific. But he wasn't doing, you know what I'm saying? Like,
he wouldn't feel great about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we might have to do it. But to be in that situation at the end of the game, especially against the Portland team, that's one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the league. So there was a play late in that game where Hunter was in there and he just wards off Duop Reith to pull in a rebound. And between him and Strus, there were moments there where they pulled down rebounds in traffic that were massive. It was massive moments because we did have our stretches where we went a little cold there, even in fourth quarter and overtime, where we'd go up. It looked like, okay, we're about to put our foot on their throat. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's tied, or, trading the intentional foul there with about 15 seconds left and then getting burned because we shank a free throw. Like, those are the moments where it felt like we had this game won a couple of times and still left the door open just a crack, but managed to prevail in the end.
And we're going to talk about clutch performances at the end of the pod. And Darius had another chance tonight that I'm not sure if you made your graphics. You had to have made it before the game ended. So
I did. We're off by one free throw. The field goal attempts, I looked, it's not impacted, but he is now, sadly, after the Houston thing, if there is one blemish, we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that. But with the Hunter trade and being able to close with Hunter at the 4 and Mobley at the 5, you are sacrificing a little bit of rim protection. Hunter is not the rim protector Jared Allen is. But you're not really sacrificing any legitimate size between the wingspan. Jared Allen's listed at 6'11". If Jared Allen were to shave his head, he's 6'9". Now, he plays big, 6'9.5", but he's not that much bigger than Hunter. And with the wingspan, you're not sacrificing a ton of length. You're improving your spacing. You have another three-point shooter and shot creator out there with Hunter. And you could play him alongside both bigs like they did in the starting lineup today if you want to. Kenny has the versatility now and the options to pick and choose how he wants to not only start games but finish games. And most teams don't have that luxury. They have their closing lineup, and it is their closing lineup for a reason. That is their best combination of 5 guys. I don't think today, Bob, we know for sure who the Cavs' best 5 are to close a game. And that's crazy to say for a team that is 50-10 through 60 games.
Well, and Kenny said in the postgame, I think we say this a lot of times when we talk about the starting lineup, the idea that it should be situationally dependent, that the guy who's the best fifth starter, sometimes it's based on who's on the other side of the floor.
Yep.
And we get into the late part of that game, and he talked about playing Hunter at the center, and he said, well, you know what? I could get away with it because they were having Kamara log minutes as their small ball center. So in situations like that, just to have that versatility, to go from a situation where it felt like, okay, you have an injured Dean as your only reliable third big, and now when all these guys are healthy, to be able to interchangeably mix in Allen, Mobley, Wade, Hunter, it just feels like we have so many more looks we can throw at people.
It's an incredible luxury. And in the backcourt, you don't have Donovan today or on Sunday. Like I said, we're recording this on Sunday. This is airing on Monday. So if you hear us say today, you know what we're talking about. But you don't have Donovan. And Ty Jerome steps in. And Bob, I know someone on the Portland staff. And after the game, I went over to talk to them real quick. And the staff guy comes out to me and says, Ty effing Jerome, are you kidding me? And I go, you know what? You're about the 17th team to say the exact same thing. It is incredible what he's doing. And as the Cavaliers go throughout this season, the maybe most shocking part of it all is that when one of their two all-star, all-NBA caliber guards are out, there's not a giant drop-off. Ty Jerome is playing at that level this season. And in a million years, I never would have anticipated that being something that we could say on a consistent basis. One-off, a random hot night, sure. But it's every time he's asked to play more minutes, he delivers, and he has single-handedly broken the morale of half a dozen teams across the NBA this season.
Absolutely. And this weekend, this back-to-back set of games here, if there wasn't a statement weekend for the Sixth Man of the Year campaign, honestly, by both these guys, Hunter and Ty Jerome, this was certainly it. Because after leading the team in plus-minus and seeing their main competition and Pritchard be a minus 35 or a minus 36 on Friday, they come out here tonight and they combine for 57 points. Just unbelievable.
I mean, Hunter with 32, the way it looks effortless for him. And I'm not sure this gets broadcast on TV sometimes. And I understand that my angle when we watch these guys at home is very specific. I get blocked by the basket if they're in the far corner, if they're in the close corner. I think I have the best angle in the house. The way it's just effortless in how he moves and shoots, and how from where he actually releases the ball, Bob, it is so far out of the traditional kind of right here pocket because of his length. It's unblockable. I've mentioned it before. We've looked at a couple of videos. It doesn't look like he breaks a sweat. And it's almost kind of frustrating to me because as someone who played basketball at, D3 is not anything special, but like to do anything is really hard. And he's just out there cruising. Looks like he's on cruise control. He shoots, flick of the wrist. He just grabs a one-handed rebound with his extendo RoboCop arms. He's locking up guys on the perimeter. Then all of a sudden he's on Donovan clinging in the post and making good contact. He's a cheat code.
And late in this game, when he knocked down those triples from the opposite corners, that was with Delano Banton on him, who's not a tiny guy. That's 6'8" or 6'9". No. So he does that thing, like he got the one on the right elbow triple where he just, faked as if he was going to put the ball on the floor. But it wasn't. It was a lazy jab step. It wasn't particularly aggressive. No. He doesn't need to create much separation, though, because he's just so tall, he can rise up over guys. Just getting somebody rocking back on their heels is enough for him. He doesn't have to get them backpedaling.
Last point on this game, then we'll move into our two other topics of discussion here, Bob. But Max Strus in the first three quarters left a lot to be desired. And Kenny called him the wild thing afterwards.
I heard asked him about what happened to Varejao. Doesn't he work for the team? I feel like they should.
Varejao does work for the team. Yeah. Kenny, I'm not sure if he's familiar that is Varejao's nickname. But either way, someone asked him about it in the post-game locker room, and Ty Jerome started cracking up on the side that he needs a Vince Vaughn jersey, or not Vince Vaughn. Who played Wild Thing in Major League? 2.5 Men.
Sheen. Charlie Sheen.
Charlie Sheen. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got to get him a Charlie Sheen jersey from that movie. But he brings some of the intangibles that, okay, let me go. I got to go back to go forward. When he misses shots, it's frustrating because in the box score, you don't see a lot of the stuff, and his box score stats and the traditional rebounds, assists, points, shooting, if he's missing shots, it leaves a lot to be desired. But I will die on the hill that you need a guy with irrational confidence who's a straight up wild card out there to be a legitimate, not championship team. Like Strus is the reason you're going to win or lose a championship. But in games like this, you just need a guy with literal irrational confidence to step up in those kind of moments and make big plays. And he hit the three in the corner at the end of regulation. They run the first play in overtime for him. He's a streaky shooter. He's not shooting as well as he would want to shoot this season. I don't think he's playing up to the level he believes he can play at this season. But he boxes out. He makes the hustle plays. He's always a pest on defense. I'm shocked he doesn't get more technicals with how he complains and
he
goes
might
back
get
and forth with the refs.
Do you think he gets a flop for that attempt to take a charge late in the game? Where I don't know if you were in the arena, so I don't know if you could see it on the replay, but
at the very last play,
Simons just misses him altogether, and he goes down. I mean, based on what we saw with Donovan Mitchell, they gave him a flopping fine for the Jalen Wells, trying to inbound it, and he kind of fell on the ground. To me, that was less egregious that when you see the replay of what Max did there.
Yeah, he certainly could, but there are little things. It's going to sound stupid because I can't actually put it into words. He makes winning plays. I think that's just the best way to describe. He makes winning plays throughout a basketball game.
That lob to Allen, he was going 100 miles an hour. I couldn't throw up an oop flat-footed with nobody between me and the guy, but to see him just sprint out in transition, full speed, and toss that up and be able to convert that play was unbelievable. He makes all those intangible plays that it's kind of the same way I felt about Merrill, but just amplified this season, where even when they don't shoot good, it doesn't by any stretch mean that they're unplayable, because they do so many intangible things and they do so many things without the ball in their hand that's meaningful to winning basketball.
And we're going to keep seeing Max Strus because I don't think Kenny has any intentions of taking him out of the starting lineup at the moment and/or not playing him a significant chunk of minutes here come playoff time. Bob, let's get into our first outside of game reaction topic here, and that is the fact that when Donovan Mitchell is facing off against the Boston Celtics, he goes from Spider-Man to Superman. I mean, we are talking about an absolute masterclass of a season from Donovan Mitchell against Boston this year. Bob made some incredible graphics we'll show in the next topic. I didn't bring my editing laptop to the game today, so I took screenshots of tweets. So I'm going to show you a couple of these tweets, and this is how you make podcasting work in the 21st century. In 4 games against Boston this season, Donovan Mitchell, 35 points, 31 points, 41 points. He's averaging 35.5 points on 62.2% true shooting. According to ESPN, Bob, he's the first player in the NBA to score 30-plus against Boston 4 times in the same season since LeBron James in 2009. And when you look at the career averages against Boston, Donovan now is up to 30.8 points per game in 20 games played against the Celtics. That is the most points per game against Boston in the history of the NBA, higher than Jordan, Luka, Kareem, Wilt, and LeBron, who are the next 5 players in that order. Mitchell on top, followed by Jordan, Doncic, Kareem, Wilt, and LeBron. Incredible company. Donovan's been incredible. I got a couple plays we'll show you in a sec about what he did in the fourth quarter on Friday night to help seal the deal for the Cavs. But Bob, what is it about Boston that Donovan goes from really good scorer to one of the greatest scorers we've ever seen?
I think it's the combination of his tools. The speed is one thing, but Donovan, as opposed to a lot of other guards his size, is able to play with a physicality that a lot of guys can't. And I think specifically against that team, he's really been able to just get to the spots he wants, to get the looks he wants. That two-handed dunk against Derek White in that game was so satisfying to watch. That I don't think that's a team. I think he has confidence. He's done it consistently, even in the playoffs. People talk about that 4-1 gentleman sweep. But, he didn't play after game 3, and he was unbelievable there. And over the course of that playoffs, people would point to Tatum and Ant and SGA as these guys who had incredible postseason runs. And Donovan Mitchell played every bit as many games as SGA did and had just as good of a statistical profile as far as true shooting, points per game, all those things. But it gets lost because a shorthanded Cavs team got run out fairly easily by the Boston Celtics. So I like it that it's happening against such a high-profile team, because I think Donovan deserves credit in a way that too many people have blown past after that Knicks series from 2 years ago and other things, where I don't think they take into the totality into consideration of the stuff that he's done, not just on a playoff stage, but in being high leverage moments. Because I stand by the idea that in high leverage games, Donovan Mitchell is better than Jason Tatum, at least when it comes to those two matching off consistently. And you can take a game like Friday and say, oh, well, the stat line for Tatum was incredible, but the majority of the damage was done in the first half or the first three quarters. And the fourth quarter, again, 26 of Donovan's points come in the second half, double-digit scoring in the fourth quarter, an efficient performance throughout. And, Tatum, 6 points in the final period. And he doesn't make a single three-pointer the entire second half. So I think it needs to be talked about more on a big stage, how good Donovan has been in these moments.
He's been incredible. He'll be a first-team All-NBA guy, assuming he doesn't get hurt here to end the season. And in particular, it's kind of crazy to me that he's had this level of success against Boston this season, because on paper, Boston has the guys to match up with Donovan. Jrue Holiday and Derek White, both plus perimeter defenders. Tatum and Brown both have size. They're both plus defenders. I know Porzingis hasn't played in all the matchups, but another, I don't necessarily say elite, but he's a good rim protector. He certainly changes a ton of shots. And when he played here in Boston and Cleveland the last time, Donovan did not care that Porzingis was in the paint. He went and dunked all over, sent him back to Latvia, essentially. But one of the things Donovan did on Friday night, and he's done when they play the Celtics time and time again, is just like how Boston tries to hunt mismatches against Cleveland, Donovan is whatever the next evolution of hunting mismatches is on the Celtics defense. And it was Sam Hauser's detriment on Friday night. And when we show you these clips in a sec, there's going to be a common thread, and that is Sam Hauser had a rough night, Bob. I haven't seen a guy get torched like that in a long time. And because they didn't have Jrue Holiday or Porzingis, they were down a short rotation, and they had no other options to play outside of Hauser. And that came back to bite Missoula in the ass. But the way Donovan attacks, it's from three. He gets to the bucket. He's better in the mid-range against Boston for whatever reason. I can't explain it, but he's hitting a higher clip of his mid-range shots against Boston than he is against any other team this year. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, but he's dominating Boston. The numbers bear. And when you look at some of these plays, Bob, we're going to add this to this is all fourth quarter buckets, by the way. And this is Sam Hauser, who's going to end up switching on him. Donovan, unfazed, completely unfazed, gets to his right hand, gets to the cup, and Hauser on his back plays halfway decent defense. I mentioned that specifically because as we move along, that's the best effort you're going to see from Sam Hauser in trying to stop a Donovan Mitchell bucket here. Let's go to the next play. Bob, I don't know if we can do a moment of silence here, but before we show this next play, let's just give Sam Hauser a moment of silence. This is great podcasting, but for everyone watching, before we show this, okay, we're ready for this. This is ISO up top with Sam Hauser. In and out, step over, cross back, or step back, hits the three. Watch Hauser's feet, Bob. He does a decent job. Switches, stop, drop, and as if he rolled, you would have believed he was on fire. The only person on fire here is Donovan Mitchell. Next one, similar situation. He's going to come back. Ball rotates around in this mid-range floater game, which Donovan has been average at best this season at, was making them all against Boston here. And this just is a late shot clock, confidence, believe in your guys, let them get the rock, let them go. And then the final one, the nail break, not the nail breaker, but the closing and one here, goes right around Hauser, gets the cup, finished with the left hand. 4 different buckets in the fourth quarter, 4 different varieties, finished with both hands, made threes. When he's in the zone like that, Bob, there's frankly nothing you can do. And for whatever reason, Boston has no answers to the Donovan Mitchell quiz.
It's beautiful. I mean, I just watching that game, it's so funny. When I see Al Horford, if it's Darius Garland, I might be a little worried. But Donovan Mitchell has no fear of him. No. And even in those situations, I feel like Horford has more fear because he doesn't come up to contest those. A lot of times he just stays in this super deep drop and concedes these floaters or these relatively soft contested drives to the rim in a way that I don't expect that after seeing how many times have we seen Horford, chase down Darius Garland, get him from behind at the rim. You don't get that. Unfortunately, get it with Donovan. Yeah, unfortunately, but Donovan has none of that intimidation factor. And for a guy who's killed us in the past, that certainly was not the case.
No, he was awesome on Friday night. Big bucket after big bucket. Anytime Tatum and Brown scored in the second half, Donovan essentially matched it by himself. And then late in the game, Darius helped close out the game, and Mobley was awesome in the fourth quarter. But in that third quarter, a lot of the Cavs' offensive charge came from 45 himself. And the way he was able to time after time after time after time get to his spots, because Boston tried to do some different things defensively against him. It didn't matter. It was like he was solving a quiz that he had the answers to beforehand. And as Boston threw something new at him, he already knew how to beat it and was one step ahead the entire game. And I'm going to be curious to see if these two teams match up again in the Eastern Conference Finals, how Boston tries to do something different, because whatever they've done in the regular season clearly has not worked. And Mazzulla is not an idiot. He likes to get choked out and he watches the town too much. So maybe he's not the brightest dude in the world, but he clearly knows how to coach a basketball team, right? The Celtics are too good to get torched by Donovan time after time. But I don't think they have one guy, despite the fact that all four of their perimeter guys are plus defenders, who's capable of just staying in front of Donovan like we've seen DeAndre and Dean do vice versa in certain situations against Tatum and Brown. So I like my chances with Donovan in that series. He may not be the rebounder that Jason Tatum is, but when it comes to scoring, he's the best guy on the court any given time when those two teams match up.
100%. I totally agree with you. And I like the way that it went in the second half, where it became essentially a lot of Brown and Tatum trying to trade mid-range shots and go bucket for bucket with Donovan, because I don't think you're going to win those games in that way. I think you have to play the way that they play early. And when we shifted to smaller ball lineups, they just weren't able to keep up with us.
No, they were not. And that was part of what happens in the clutch. And the Cavs have been so much better than every team in the clutch this season. And that's what we're going to go for the third and final topic on today's podcast. Bob, I texted you and said, hey, last topic, Bob's choice. Whatever you want to go at, the floor is yours. Have at it. So tell the people and set up here how you want to do this final topic.
Well, what I wanted to do was I wanted to highlight this was all essentially a way to prop up Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and the Cavaliers by looking at some of the people who I think many of us traditionally think of as, clutch performers or are framed that way, and see how they're actually performing this season. So what I did was I gathered some of my most disappointing clutch performers so that we can parallel it against what we're seeing from a Darius Garland and from a Cavs team as a whole.
So where do you want to start? I have your graphics. You call for a play.
Start with number 5, who it's Green. Start with Green.
There we go, Bob. Walk us through this here.
All right. So what I did here was I pulled some of the highlights and lowlights, and most of these are going to be lowlights, as you can distinguish from the little, donkey silhouette there. To take some of the highest volume, what I did was I looked at the guys who have scored the most points in the clutch during this NBA season, and I kind of looked behind the numbers to see, okay, what do the stats tell us in terms of who's actually performing well in the clutch versus how they're getting those points, and is it coming in an efficient manner? And with Jalen Green, one of the things that you see is he has incredibly bad true shooting percentage. Now, the thing with the Houston Rockets is they're 20-12 in clutch situations, which is a very good record. So when you see something like that, similar to with our own Cavaliers, you would assume that the analytics are going to be pretty good for all their players because they're going to be on the right side of things. But Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün, to a certain extent, have been very bad in the clutch. And Jalen Green specifically, one of the worst players in the NBA in the clutch, which this just serves my Mobley agenda. But despite being one of the best free throw shooters in the NBA in the clutch at 92%, which is higher than our own Darius Garland, by the way, he's just a 52% true shooting guy, shooting 36-30 splits. A turnover machine. There's only one player in the entire NBA with more turnovers in the clutch than he has, and he compiles that with basically minimal assists. 9 assists in the clutch, which is next to nothing. For context sake, Jason Tatum has, almost 3 times that many, 23 assists, I believe, in the clutch. So on top of being a turnover machine, it's not even necessarily coming as a result of trying to involve his teammates, because he only has 9 assists in that span. And a minus 1.9 net rating is basically impossible to do when a team is 20-12 in the clutch. Even Şengün, who has not made a single three-pointer in clutch time, he's 0-4. He's not particularly effective. He's still almost a plus 13 net rating on the same team. So that speaks to the idea that Jalen Green has been pretty horrific in the clutch this season. So I guess we can move on to number 4, who I believe.
Wait, Bob, I want to mention something on Jalen Green real quick. I just looked up the Rockets clutch stats.
Yes.
The plus minus in the clutch for these 4 players. These are all the teammates, by the way. Jalen Green on the season's a plus 19 in clutch minutes this season. Şengün, a plus 49. Amen Thompson, a minus 42.
Oh, goodness.
And then Dylan Brooks is a plus 9. So Şengün is 30 as a 30-point differential in the right direction. Then Jalen Green in clutch situations, and Amen Thompson at minus 42 in the clutch. That has to be a typo.
That is so difficult to do, because when we're talking about plus minus, unless a team has completely fluid closing lineups, to have such wide deviation, like if you were to look at stuff like net rating and plus minus for the Cavs, almost all their great players are clumped similarly. There may be, you might waffle back and forth between, okay, is Darius the best? Is Donovan the best? But those units that typically close are all benefiting from those stats. So to have that kind of variance is crazy. And it brings me to number 4, because there shares some similarities there. If you want to bring up Ant Edwards. Ant Edwards, a guy who a lot of people think of him as a closer, I think, if you're just basing it off narratives. And he certainly has a significant amount of points in the clutch. He's 4th in the NBA with 106 points. I'm trying to highlight the good, because certainly it's not all bad. But if I was to take the whole picture, the thing that's crazy about Ant Edwards and basically all of the Timberwolves is, as Mike was alluding to with the plus minus, the Timberwolves are one of the worst plus minus teams in the clutch this season. Rudy McDaniels is possibly even worse than Ant Edwards, but he just doesn't have the volume of shooting and usage that an Ant Edwards has. So again, another guy who's in the mid-50s as far as true shooting percentage, and 40-30 splits is pretty horrific. I did think his rebounding was impressive, because there's only one guy, Domantas Sabonis, who has reeled in more rebounds than Ant Edwards. And I don't think this is a guy you typically associate with that, but some of that may be due to the fact that he's missing a lot of his own shots. Perhaps he's gathering some of those. I would have to look more at every individual shot. But a minus 48 is 4th worst in the NBA. And while that is more of a team stat, it's almost impossible to find a situation where you can take a guy who's in the top 5 of points scored in the clutch and the team results are so absolutely horrific.
My initial takeaways from the first 2 is guys who are heliocentric scorers on offense in the clutch. It becomes a lot more difficult to score when there's no ball movement and it's one guy going 1-on-5 against a defense that is locked in. In the first 43 minutes of a game, you can go 1-on-5. For the most part, teams aren't fully locked in defensively. In those final 4 or 5 minutes of a close game, that's when you get the playoff-like atmospheres. That's when you get the playoff-like defenses. And so far, 2 for 2 on guys who like to isolate and have a lot left to be desired in terms of their efficiency in those situations. And I know who the next 2 are, and that's going to lead us right into that too.
Okay, so the number 3 is Jason Tatum. You can pull him up. It's funny because what you said with the heliocentric stuff and the being the center of the universe score, it's sort of that Kobe correlation where people think, because they associate in their mind, okay, this is a guy who I want to take the final shot. And a lot of times, if they tend to be more on the selfish side of players when it comes to taking the final looks, and you know what's going to happen, their numbers will suffer because of it. Now, Jason Tatum's not in that situation. He's surrounded by a lot of talent. And the whole narrative has been, well, yes, he didn't shoot well in the playoffs, but he led his team in points and rebounds and assists, and that's why he truly is one of the greatest. However, if you were to look at his clutch stats this year, what you would find is that he is one of the single worst. He is the worst 3-point shooter amongst the top 20 clutch scorers in the NBA at under 18%. There's only 2 guys in the entire NBA who are shooting below 25% on 3-point attempts. And you'll see both of those guys highlighted here. But Jason Tatum is one of them. I don't want to spoil the other. So terrible 3-point shooter in the clutch. Terrible at the free throw line was a surprise to me.
That is surprising.
And he padded that today in the game that he had today. Coming into Sunday, he was 17 of 26. So that helps contribute to the fact that he has the worst true shooting percentage amongst the top 15 clutch scorers by volume at 50.7%. Terrible at the free throw line, awful from outside the arc. And while he did chip in 23 assists, which to his credit is the second most amongst players to Trae Young in the NBA, that's good. But it doesn't make up for what I think this is a case where the stats mirror a lot of what the eyeball test would tell you, which is if you tell me Jason Tatum has the ball at the end of the game and he's going to take the shot, generally speaking, I feel pretty confident about it.
He's the kind of guy who, when he gets hot, is incredibly hot. But when he's not making shots, he takes a lot of shots that you go, are we sure that was a good look? Are we sure Boston couldn't do better? Are we sure the defense is upset that that's the shot they gave up? My one complaint with Tatum, who, by the way, I think gets unfairly hated on. He's a really, really good player.
I don't think he gets unfairly hated on at all. I think all the hate that he gets is deserved. And the fact that he's constantly telling me a victim while holding up an NBA championship trophy is like, just shut up, dude. Just shut up.
Fair. I think he's a top 6-7 guy in the league.
I agree.
Like, he's a good player.
You could make the argument for me. Anywhere between 4 and 7 would be probably where he falls for me.
I have him at 5 or 6, depending on how I'm feeling that day. But
the issue, Mike, is it's never good enough. It's, well, if you don't talk about me like I'm Jokic or like I'm SGA, well, then you're doing me a disrespect when that's absolutely ridiculous. And what happened on Friday should be evidence of that.
And he's not Jokic. He's not SGA. He's not Luka when he's healthy. He's not in that tier. And part of what frustrates me as someone who, if I like the Celtics, what frustrates me about Tatum is it seems like he can get whatever shot he wants almost whenever he wants. And he seems to settle for certain things way too frequently. And I think in the clutch, and I don't have this is a guess. I do not have, this is just me. I feel like he does not nearly get to the free throw line enough for a guy who should be able to get past defenders with relative ease, considering his size, his strength, his handle. And he settles for too many. Kobe's his favorite player. Kobe loved these shots too, but these mid-range, back to the basket, turn fades, like he can make those. I don't know if those are great shots. And that's kind of what it seems like in the clutch. His shot profile becomes congested with those kind of looks, as opposed to some of the looks that he gets where he can generate really, really good shots, not necessarily settling for the mid-range turnarounds with a guy on your back. So I'm not surprised. I'm surprised the numbers are this bad, but I'm not surprised he's near the bottom in terms of the best players in the league and not being as proverbially, I always say that word wrong, as proverbially,
I know what you're saying.
Proverbially as clutch as you would think he is.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that was a big part of the reason I wanted to do this, is because when compared against a lot of the Cavaliers, I think if anything, I don't think he's disrespected. I think he's propped up too much, because he'll put forth the stat line like you saw on Friday night. And what you lose if you weren't watching the game is the context of everything that happened when the game was on the line and when it mattered the most. So, but we can put that aside for now. We'll move on to number 2, and that is Harden. Okay, so James Harden, this one shocked me a little bit. He has been terrible this season. Now, the first couple things I'm not incredibly surprised by. Most turnovers in the clutch, but by a ton. Second place on this list was 14, and 19 in 93 minutes is not even that much. Like the most clutch minutes played in the NBA is Tyler Herro, who has almost 140. So for James Harden to have 19 turnovers in just 93 minutes is ridiculous. Terrible shooting. He's one of only 2 guys in the top 18 who's below 78% from the free throw line. And that, you know who the other one is. It's Jason Tatum. The 4 for 25 from 3-point range is awful. Now there's guys who shoot worse, who shoot a little bit more. They've made more threes, but they shoot equally bad percentages. If there's anything saving Harden here, it's that 25 3-point attempts isn't that much compared to some of the league leaders. And then the last thing is, of course, he's an egregious fouler. 3rd most in the NBA at 15. And the guys around him, Josh Hart, McDaniels in Minnesota, Dylan Brooks, those are guys, Dennis Schroeder, those are guys who are tasked with taking on defensive assignments. So for somebody like Harden, who's never been known as a defender, to manage to compile 15 personal fouls in the clutch, it's the trifecta of horrible outside shooting, a massive amount of turnovers, and fouling too much, which oftentimes directly leads to points for the opponent as well. So he's been absolutely horrible. I think if I was tiering the terrible players in my clutch, I would say that I would put the bottom 2 guys, 4 and 5, I'd put them around one another, because Ant makes up for a lot of it on just pure volume, even if his efficiency is terrible. Tatum's kind of in that middle tier. And then these last 2 guys, Harden and number 1, they are objectively hurting their team.
So Harden, I thought going into this was going to be number 1. When you look at these numbers again, and he's never been great in the clutch. I don't care what the numbers say. I'm looking at playoffs. He's never been the same James Harden that he's been in the regular season when it comes to the playoffs. And that's typically in a similar vein, regular season, first 43 minutes of a game to the last 5. He's had clutch moments here and there, but overall, I never felt comfortable about James Harden in the clutch. How someone is ahead of James Harden with these numbers, I know who it is because you sent me the graphics and I ingested them myself. But if I didn't, I never would have believed that you had someone higher, or I guess lower. Lower. But really higher. Yeah.
Lower but higher. Yeah.
On this list than James Harden. So, Bob,
throw up number one. Throw up number one. Just pop the graphic on. It's Tyler Herro of the Miami Heat, who leads the NBA in clutch minutes at nearly 140. Now, he has a respectable amount of points in the clutch. 71 would put him in the top 15, just on the outside of it. Darius Garland, for example, has 77 points. But the difference is Darius Garland has 77 points on 42 field goal attempts. Tyler Herro has 71 points on 80 field goal attempts. It's the third most field goal attempts in the clutch, and yet he's barely in the top 15. He's in a tie for 14th place. Now, the good, I don't want to just blow past this just so it's not all just me trashing people. He did get 6 steals, which I found fairly surprising. But he is perhaps one of the only people in the top 50 to go below 40% true shooting. That is dead last, absolute last place, 39.8% true shooting. And the only person at 18.4% from three-point shooting, he's only doing better than Tatum and Şengün, who's 0 for 4 as far as players in the top 15. And Şengün, I think we can give a pass to because that's a big man. Nobody expects him to lace it up. 4 is an extremely low volume. But the difference between him and, say, a Harden is, whereas Harden was 16% from outside the arc, he did it on 25 three-point attempts. Tyler Herro has 49 three-point attempts, which is far and away the most in the NBA. So while he has teammates, I mean, Bam Adebayo is one of the guys this season who's hit a game-winning bucket. But Tyler Herro has been an absolute abomination. And his team, because of it, 13 and 16 in the clutch.
Yeah. The numbers are bad. That's a team that Bam is a good player. Do not take that wrong. But I don't think Bam's creating offense. Herro's really their only offensive creator. And I'm guessing, based on these numbers, that Miami just runs every play in the clutch through Tyler Herro.
I mean,
every single play. And he's not a Tatum.
He's not truly a creator. And with Rozier not even finishing games a lot of times.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that. Like, you made an excellent point, which is that a lot of times, Jalen Green, Tyler Herro, and Edwards, these guys are tasked with do everything when it gets into those moments. But in some cases, in the case of Jalen Green, I don't think that has to be the case. I think he could choose to run more through Fred. He could choose to run more through Şengün. Those are options. And I think that's a big part of the reason why there's such a variance in the plus minus, because they have more things available to them than, say, Miami. I would say there was a part of me that was waffling on, should I put Harden above Herro?
I would put Harden at number 1 on this. I understand the volume is crazy for Herro. Like, crazy volume, 80 shots is absurd. And when you look at the most field goal attempts in the league, in the clutch, 80 is tied for the third most. He leads the NBA with 49 three-point attempts. By the way, he's shooting 18% on those, which I know you mentioned, but it just has to be mentioned again. You have the most three-point attempts, and you are tied for 8th in makes. So not a great percentage whatsoever. 18% is putrid. But he's the only offensive creator in Miami, and he gets tasked with a lot. And he's not at the same level as the elite offensive creator. Like, if you asked somebody, you need a bucket, Ant Edwards or Tyler Herro, 100 out of 100 people are taking Ant Edwards. Unless Tyler Herro's cousin was in that pool of 100 people, every single person's taking Ant Edwards. And it's, frankly, asking a player to do more than he's probably capable of doing. And that's why Miami is kind of stinking this year. And disappointing is Butler was supposed to be that guy for them, and now he's in Golden State. But, Bob, we mentioned the bad. Let's talk about the good. Before you bring up your Darius Garland stuff, I just want to mention to people, we talked about the plus-minus, right? All the plus-minuses. The top 4 guys in the league this season in clutch minute plus-minus. Number 1, Darius Garland, plus 69. Evan Mobley, number 2, plus 61. Donovan Mitchell, number 3, plus 51. And Jared Allen, number 4, at plus 50. It's a good time to be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers in the clutch, and Darius has been the best of the best. So, Bob, take it away.
Okay, well, Darius Garland is a guy who started out on just a torrid pace. I want you to look in the top right of this graphic. 67 minutes is an extremely low amount of minutes. It would be hard for him to win the points. Like the most points in the clutch, Trae Young has 140. He did it on 127 minutes. So to put that in perspective, you're talking about 2 times the minutes. So while some people may brush off Garland because 74 points puts him just 10th in the NBA. He's currently at 77, by the way, after tonight's game. But 77 points puts him at 10th in the NBA, tied with Jalen Green and Kevin Durant. The difference is the manner in which he does it is exceptionally efficient. Heading into the evening tonight, he was scoring 1.8 points per shot attempt. Now I said it with Herro. For Herro to have, 71 points on 80 shots versus 74 on 41 is absolutely obscene. So on top of that, he's first. When you take players who have greater than or equal to 15% usage, and the reason I use that as a barometer is because these are people who are finishing possessions with shots. Usage directly correlates to, okay, the possession ends with you putting the shot up, typically. So the guys who have heavy usage, it's a great barometer to look at to see, okay, what are they doing in terms of efficiency? And Darius Garland at 73.6% is ridiculously good. Remember, again, Tyler Herro did not even make it to 40%. And even Jason Tatum, 50%, he was hovering at. Darius Garland is nearly 25% better. He's first amongst the top 20 scorers by volume and field goal percentage. He's first in three-point percentage. And a 32.7 net rating is, again, first amongst NBA players with 15% better usage. Now, if you were to take that filter off, what you would find is, again, on net rating, he'd be competing with his teammates. So Darius Garland, to me, is far and away the most clutch player in the NBA. I don't know if he'll win this award because, quite frankly, the Cavs are boat racing teams. So that's why his sample of minutes is 67 minutes. And if anything's happened from the beginning of the season to the second half of the season, is that where Darius Garland was probably right there in all those conversations as we were in closer games, as the season has wore on, the gap has widened between these other players, the Jalen Brunsons, the Trae Youngs, who are pushing 100, 130 minutes. So Darius Garland, I just wanted to put that up there because especially when set against the backdrop of a Jason Tatum or some of these other people who are positioned. I mean, here's something that I didn't make graphics for these guys, but take Kevin Durant, who also has 77 points. He is 4 for 18 from outside the arc. He's shooting 22%. So Darius Garland currently 60-62 splits on field goal percentage or three-point percentage. Kevin Durant, who has scored as many points as he has, 45-22 splits. Devin Booker, also terrible, surprisingly. And yet, Phoenix, 17-10 in clutch games. I make sense of it. I can't. But I can tell you both those guys woefully inefficient. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, another guy who's right there. He's not quite at what Darius is, but he's only a tick below when it comes to his net rating, efficiency, all that combination. He doesn't have the shooting split numbers, but he has the impact numbers, the net rating and all those things. So,
and here's the other thing that you didn't mention, Bob, and you gave all the good numbers except you missed one. He's got 13 assists and 2 turnovers in the clutch. It's a 6.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. In 77 minutes in the clutch this year, Darius Garland has 2 turnovers. He has 4 steals and 2 blocks. So he has twice as many steals as turnovers and just as many blocks as turnovers in the clutch this season. I've made the case before. I haven't updated it, but the numbers to me stand still, or it still stands true. He's the most efficient clutch player in basketball. And despite the fact that Donovan had 41 on Friday, Darius was just as crucial in closing the game in the final few minutes and putting away Boston. And when Cleveland needs a bucket late, part of the reason that Donovan and Darius have both been so effective is you can't really shade your coverage to either one. They're equally as dangerous in these situations. And if Darius is going to shoot 73% true shooting percentage, over 8 of 13 from 3, which gets you to 61% from 3, 60% from the floor. I mean, Donovan, for comparison, 41% from the floor, 42% from 3. So he's 20 points higher than Donovan in both those categories. He's been an assassin. It's the only way I can describe him in the clutch this year, Bob. American sniper.
Again,
Put him on the Photoshop. You're better than me with Photoshop, Bob. Darius Garland is American Sniper in the clutch this year.
He's amazing. And I do want to point out, Donovan Mitchell, just 2 turnovers in the clutch. Now, there's one guy who's not a Cavalier that I feel like I should give props. And the fact this game went 3 hours prevented me from making the graphic. But the thing I found most surprising on a non-Cavalier basis was, let me read you Domantas Sabonis's clutch numbers. Now,
Okay.
he's played 121 minutes in the clutch, which is a lot. He has scored 62 points, so less than Darius Garland. But he's made 22 of 27 shots, which is 82% from the floor. And from three-point range, he's 5 of 6 in the clutch. So he's shooting 82, 83 splits, and a respectable 13 of 17 from the free throw line. On top of that, 48 rebounds. Do you remember me saying Anthony Edwards at 35 rebounds was second?
Oh my God.
Bonus has 48 rebounds, a 13 rebound gap between first and second place. And on the offensive glass, he has 19 offensive rebounds, which is, of course, number one. Second place is Walker Kessler with 15. So I know people will, and I do this to a certain extent. Like, if you were to ask me what's more impressive, of course, I'm going to say it's a guy with the physical profile of Darius Garland, a perimeter player doing the numbers he's doing. But Domantas Sabonis, a guy who's constantly talked about as somebody who can't, he will not help you, push you over the top. Well, his clutch numbers are painting a different story, because when the game's been on the line, that man has showed up in a big way. And keep in mind, this is a guy who played alongside De'Aaron Fox, who was a clutch player of the year.
Yep.
I don't think anybody's noticing this. I certainly didn't expect to see it. And when I dove into the numbers, my mind was blown to see how efficient he's been, especially just the fact that he's only missed 1 3-pointer in the clutch this season.
Yeah, 81% from the floor and 83% from three. Yeah, not too shabby. When your free throw number is your lowest number, Bob, you're doing something right. Bob, that's going to wrap it up for a little Cavs and coffee on a Monday morning. If you don't listen to the Fear the Fro pod and don't follow Bob on Twitter, I highly recommend you do. Bob, you want to plug the podcast real quick?
Yeah.
Tell people why Fear the Fro should become part of their daily Cavs routine.
I think you should listen, because it's a nice communal listen for people who love the Cavs. It's a very positive Cavalier podcast. I think we do a good job of highlighting people who don't give us the respect that we deserve, and wage wars on that front, including a man who said that DeAndre Hunter was not really a difference maker. So you can go to wherever you podcast. You can search Fear the Fro. Just give it a listen. If you don't like it, if I'm not your cup of tea, so be it. But Mike's joined me on the podcast, and if you're watching this, presumably you like Mike, so I think you should like me. That's my pitch.
Bob does some great work. Follow him on Twitter, too. You can see his handle under his name there, at FearTheFro Pod. Jason's back from his European vacation next week, so we're going to do another podcast this week. We'll figure out who my Jason replacement will be. I'll call it a Jason upgrade, actually, because, Bob, it's always more fun talking to you than it is with Jason. So we'll do that again later this week. Check out Bob on the Fear the Fro pod, and we will see you on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show here in 2 hours and 7 minutes. For now, though, he's Bob Schmidt with Fear the Fro. I'm Mikey McNuggets. Have a good one, and go Cavs. Peace.